Today, we're diving into a story that sits at a really dangerous crossroads, where law, language, and power all collide. It's about what happens when a government decides that just words are more threatening than actions. And it all centers on the incredible case of one man, Dr. Chen Jingyuan.
Okay, so let's just get right into it. The basic facts here are, well, they're pretty staggering. Dr. Chen Jinyuan, a physicist with a PhD, was sentenced to 20 months in prison. And for what? For sharing and commenting on articles, images, and videos online. We're not talking about calls to violence here. We're talking about things like art, political commentary, and historical discussions. So the question is, how on earth does that land you in prison?
And you just heard it, right there, in his own words from a letter he wrote in prison. He doesn't see himself as a criminal at all. He sees himself as a scholar, someone whose whole life has been about pursuing truth. And that really gets to the core of this whole thing, doesn't it? A man whose entire career was built on questioning and analyzing things was all of a sudden thrown in jail for doing exactly that. The personal cost to him has been just immense. But his story, it really shines a light on a much, much bigger crisis. To really understand what happened, you have to look at the official charge. You see, the state didn't go after him for something like treason. No, they used a much more common and, frankly, a much more slippery legal tool. The charge is called picking quarrels and provoking trouble. Now, legal experts have a nickname for this. They call it a pocket crime. And that's because it's so incredibly vague that the authorities can basically just pull it out of their pocket to make it fit almost any situation they don't like, especially when it comes to things people say online. It's a really powerful tool precisely because nobody's quite sure where its boundaries are. Now, here's the really crucial part. Even a law as vague as this one is supposed to have specific rules. For someone to be convicted, the prosecution has to prove 3 separate things. 1, the information was actually verifiably false. 2, the person knew it was false when they shared it. And 3, it caused real, actual, serious public disorder. They have to prove all 3. Not 1, not 2, but all 3.
So you have to wonder, right? How does the prosecution's case actually hold up against its own 3-part test? Well, spoiler alert, when you start applying their own rules to their own evidence against Dr. Chen, the whole thing just completely falls apart. Okay, first up, falsity. The law demands proof that the stuff he shared was objectively false. But the prosecution, they offered 0 proof, none. In fact, Dr. Chen, in his own defense, broke down his posts into categories: art, emotional expressions, analysis. I mean, how can a political cartoon or a historical photo be false? It's an opinion, an interpretation. It's not a fact you can prove or disprove. The state just completely sidestepped that.
So, that's strike 1. How about strike 2? Intent. The state had to prove that Dr. Chen knew he was spreading lies. Again, they came up with nothing. No evidence. Instead, Dr. Chen basically said, "Look, I'm a scientist. My whole job is to be skeptical." He argued that he had no way and no obligation to know for sure if every single thing he saw online was 100% true. The prosecution's whole argument pretty much came down to, well, he has a PhD, so he should have known better. But that's not evidence, is it? That's just an assumption. And that brings us to the final nail in the coffin: harm. The law is super clear on this. The speech has to cause serious public disorder. So where were the protests, the riots, the mass panic? The prosecution presented, you guessed it, 0 evidence of any of it. In fact, most of his posts had almost no engagement at all. We're talking a few likes, a few retweets. This serious disorder they claimed he caused, it just never happened. So let's just recap. The prosecution's case fails on all 3 of its own legal requirements. And that forces us to ask a much bigger question. If the law wasn't actually followed, then what was this whole thing really about? Is this just one bad case? Or is this a sign that there's a problem with the law itself? To answer that, we actually need to zoom out a bit. We need a new tool. We have to step away from the specific legal codes for a second and look at the philosophy of what law even is. And for that, a 19th century legal philosopher named John Austin gives us a really powerful way to think about it. So, Austin had this really straightforward idea. He called the command theory of law. He said law is pretty simple. It's a command backed up by a punishment that people just get used to obeying. But, and this is a huge but, he argued that for a legal system to actually work in the long run, people can't just obey because they're scared. They have to obey because they have a rational trust in the system itself.
And Austin's theory gives us this super clear dividing line. On one hand, you have a healthy legal system. He calls it a rational command. That's where authority is based on trust, and people obey voluntarily. But when a command has no rational basis, like in Chin's case, where none of the legal requirements were met, it stops being law and it becomes what he calls naked violence. Its authority isn't based on trust anymore, it's based on fear. Obedience isn't voluntary, it's forced. The punishment isn't there to uphold a logical rule, it's there to create a chilling effect, to make everyone else afraid to speak up. In Austin's world, that's just a bad law.
But we can actually go even one level deeper here. What if the real battle isn't just about bad laws or messed up prosecutions? What if the real battle is for control of reality itself? And what if that control comes from controlling language? This is where we need one last tool from the world of contemporary language philosophy. And it suggests something pretty wild, that the real crime here wasn't what Dr. Chen did. The crime was constructed by the words the state used to describe what he did. So there was this brilliant philosopher, Wittgenstein, and he came up with this idea of language games. He argued that words don't have one single fixed meaning. Their meaning comes from how we use them in a specific situation or a game. And think about it. Whoever gets to set the rules of the game, well, they get to control what all the words mean. So let's look at the language game being played in this very case. The law requires serious public disorder. For you and me, that means chaos, right? Riots in the streets, panic. But in the courtroom's game, the state just redefines the word chaos to mean a handful of retweets. By completely changing the definition, they control the outcome. They disconnect the legal term from what it actually means in the real world.
And this leads us to the real mind bender. Another philosopher, J.L. Austin, no relation to the first one, argued that sometimes when we say things, we aren't just describing reality, we're creating it. Think about when a judge says, "I sentence you to 20 months." Those words aren't just describing something, they are performing an action that makes it real. And in this case, the court's verdict didn't just describe a crime that happened. No, it created the crime by applying words like false information and chaos to a situation where they just didn't fit. The verdict itself was an act of power that literally manufactured a crime out of thin air.
So, after this journey through law and philosophy and language, where does that leave the man at the center of it all? We come back to Dr. Chen, who, by the way, continues to write and appeal his case from his prison cell. And when you look at it through this lens of language philosophy, what he's doing takes on a whole new meaning. You see, he's not just defending his own innocence against a bad prosecution anymore. He's fighting back inside the language game. By refusing to accept the state's definitions, by insisting on logic and reason, he is staging a philosophical act of resistance. He's defending the very idea that our words should have some connection to reality. And all of this leaves us with one final and pretty unsettling question. Dr. Chen's case shows us a legal system that seems to be ignoring its own rules, operating on fear, and twisting the meaning of words to create crimes. So when a system of law is used not to find justice, but to silence reason and punish thought, what is it truly defending? And what's the cost of that for all of us?